Watering the Garden with Keith Ramsey. Hey, Keith here with Garden Supply Company. You know, when you're getting into beekeeping, I always tell people it's treat and feed. Today we're talking about feeding. Feeding is a science. There's a lot to it, but I'm going to go through just some of the basics. Different types of feeders. This is a feeder that Jason that works with us came up with for residential use. It's very similar to a hummingbird feeder. When you feed, you want to feed 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. You're feeding them sugar. Sugar's as close as you can get to nectar. People feed corn syrup too, but corn syrup is not as similar to nectar as anything else. Basically, you would fill this jar up about 60%. When you're mixing 1-to-1, it's one part sugar by weight to 1 part water by weight. So when you figure, you know, it's about 8 pounds per gallon, you kind of figure, you know, but it's not that exact of a science. If you fill the jar up about 65%, add warm water to it, shake it up, get it to the point where it's become clear, turn it upside down in here, and that creates a suction, and you can hang this outside. Fascinating to watch. Bees end up on here. There's 200, 300, 400 bees, and as they're pulling the sugar water out of there, they're falling off and they're flying back to the hive. So that's just kind of a nice, interesting thing. If you got a pollinator garden, put a shepherd's hook out there, put one of these out there. When bees are feeding, they're absolutely as easy as they can be to be around. You can walk straight up to them. The kids can walk straight up to them. Everybody could always get stung, but when bees are feeding and they're happy, they're not in a stinging mood. So that's really fun to try. I'd give one a try if you're interested in bees and you're not ready to jump into beekeeping. So if you've got bees, there's a few different ways to feed bees. You've got top feeders, which go on the top of the hive. Basically, it's a lined wooden box. The bees can come up through the bottom here. They crawl out into here, but they can climb back out on the screen, go back down into the hive. So you fill this whole surface. So basically, you're putting it under the inner cover on top of the hive. Fill it up once a week until you get the hive where it needs to be. When I first started keeping bees, you know, people would talk about light hive. Is it a light hive? And I'm like, I always thought they meant light on bees or light on honey or light on whatever. I said, what do you mean by light at some point in time? And somebody said, well, pick up your hive and see if it's light. And so that's the key when you're feeding. Use 2 or 3 fingers. Come back behind the hive, lift it up. If you've got multiple hives, lift a couple of them up. Lift it when you start. Lift it after the bees start creating brood, bringing in nectar, and you'll start to kind of feel when a hive's light and when it's heavy, and you'll know when to feed. And then there's checking the hive on the inside too. So if you feel like your hive's getting on the heavy side, it might be time to pull a few frames out of the center and make sure that you're not getting honey locked. So what basically the bees are bringing in so much nectar, they're starting to fill the brood pattern, and then the queen won't have room to lay, and you'll end up light on bees instead of light on nectar. This is a bucket feeder. A bucket feeder, it's got a screen on the top. It's a 1-gallon feeder. You can do one of 2 things. You can take the top off. You need to be cautious when you're doing this, because if we get a lot of rain, you could flood a hive. But you take the top off, you set it on here. You could also put your top right back on there, just to keep rain from getting in the inner cover. But that way the bees come up through the inner cover. They're able to take in the sugar water, and you can keep them well fed. So basically, from a 1-to-1 and a 2-to-1 scenario, 1-to-1 is great for it stimulates the bees to clean the hive, which also helps with mites, prepare for an oncoming nectar flow. So the one-to-one will get the queen laying. They can store one-to-one. They just have to spend a lot more time drying it down. So if you really need to build sugar stores, you would move to 2-to-1. And remember, that's always by weight. So it's 7 pounds of sugar to 1 pound, to a gallon of water. Entrance feeders are the third type. You can put a ball jar on here. You slide it in. As a new beekeeper, a lot of times these are great ways to do it because you can see how much nectar the bees are taking, and you're checking on your bees on a regular basis. There's a couple types of supplements that you want to add. Pro Health gives you a lot of good things that bees appreciate. You're mixing it with the sugar water and you're adding it to your feeder. This is microbes. It's beneficial powder. You can add it to the top of the hive. You put it when you go to add more sugar water. You're just sprinkling it on the top frames, and that kind of aids with digestion and with the bee, keeps the bees healthy. That pretty much wraps it up for feeding. Again, Jason and I are always here at the store. Jason can be reached at jason@gardensupplyco.com. Stop by, ask us questions. It's an easy hobby to get into. It's a lot of learning. It takes years to pick it all up, but we're here to help. Come by anytime.